At long last, the sacred tapes.
Hi, I'm Dad Clements, and I used to make stuff like this. So today is Father's Day, and I'm going over to my parents later tonight to celebrate, but I actually stopped by early this morning to steal this. This is a collection of the original run of U.S. state quarters. In 1999, the U.S. Mint began a 10-year initiative to make individualized quarters for every state in the country. And at about that same time, 2000, 2001, I made this frame to collect them all in. Now from far away it looks alright, but upon closer inspection, you can see it's in pretty rough shape. The quarters are just mounted in a piece of foam core, which for drilling 50 holes by hand in foam core with a Forstner bit, it's actually a bit impressive, but the edges have frayed and it's bent and torn in several places. And all of the corners of the frame have separated, and the bottom corner is completely cracked as it fell off the wall once or twice. So I'm gonna make a new one, and seeing as I only have a few hours to get it done, it's laser time. So to mount the quarter, I'm just using some craft foam, and this stuff cuts like butter in the laser, and I got a really nice fit for the quarter. So it holds it in there pretty well. I could go probably a little bit tighter, but that should be fine because my plan is to take the walnut veneer, which is cut just a little bit smaller, so that basically gives it a lip to keep it in there. And now ideally, I would mount the craft foam to a rigid back so that you pop the coin in, and then instead of this really thin, delicate veneer, it'd probably be better to do it on something much more rigid, so like a nice piece of walnut plywood, maybe 3 millimeters thick, that would just sit on top of the coin. But since this takes quite a long time to laser, and I like the way the walnut looks a lot better, I'm instead going to glue the craft foam to the veneer, which will give it a little bit more stability. At least it'll prevent it from, snapping and cracking in half. And then we'll place the quarters in and then just put a back around that. And I think that'll work okay. Though making the hole smaller will make it pretty difficult to line that up. So I don't know if I like the look of that better. That kind of has a nice look to it, but I went with the smaller hole, and this was pretty easy to make. So if I do want to try making it again, it was quite simple and I can just laser out some new parts. Now before gluing those two together, I'm going to try and give the veneer just a bit more strength and some protection. Normally I would just reach for the shellac, but I do like the sound of acrylic coating, so I think I'm just going to use the clear coat and put a couple coats of that on both sides. Giving that some time to dry, I moved on to making the actual frame, and I'm just using some scrap pine 2x4 for this. And it's certainly not the first choice when making a nice decorative frame, but I think it's going to end up giving me the look I'm looking for. I'm really not sure of the direction at this point. I'm just kind of making it up as I go. Choosing one of the more decorative router bits that I have. I went ahead and routed one edge of the board. And then decided to just route the other. And that gave me a pretty interesting looking profile. Lowering the blade to make the rabbit rebate rivet in the back of the frame, performing a test cut to check the depth. And that looks pretty good. So I'll go ahead and make the first shallow cut in all the boards. Adjusting the fence to cut from the other side of the board, which should remove that square of wood, leaving me with my rabbit rebate rivet. Now on to my favorite part, cutting the 45-degree miters. I made all these boards extra long, so I should have plenty of material to work with to cut the wrong angle first, and then cut the wrong angle again, and then maybe cut the right angle. But not the right angle, the 45-degree angle. Now, there's a lot of fancy methods and math that you can use to figure out what length you need to cut your boards for a frame. I'm just measuring from the top of the groove down to the length that I want. And somehow, I might have ended up with the best miters I have ever done. They fit together almost perfectly, with no gaps, and everything was square. Now to do a proper glue up, I'm first coating all of the end grain with a layer of glue, allowing that to soak in and then dry a bit. So that when I do a second layer of glue, there's actually some glue left to hold the pieces together. And I'm first just clamping those pieces together with some masking tape, and really that should be enough. But I have one of these fancy band clamps that I haven't really used yet, so I figured I'd give that a whirl. Now while I give that some time to dry, I turn my attention back to the coin insert and apply some spray adhesive to the walnut veneer. I then very carefully stick down the craft foam, doing my best to align all those circles. And now with the frame dry enough, I'm going to do something that I have never tried before, splines. I made a pretty simple spline jig off camera. Basically, it's just some boards that allow me to hold the frame at a 45-degree angle and slide it across the table saw. I decided to run the jig through the saw first just to cut the slot into it. And then there was nothing left to do but try it out. And it worked exactly as it was supposed to. It worked really well. I felt really safe and confident pushing that through the saw, and it made a nice, clean slot into all four edges of the frame. Now here, I'm sure you can clearly see what I'm doing. I'm cutting out the splines. These are essentially just thin strips of wood that will fit into the slots that I just cut on the corners of the frame. Now my splines ended up being a little loose fitting, so I'm using a generous amount of glue. And if it's not clear, the whole point of doing these splines is that it's going to give the frame an incredible amount of structure. As much as I love just screwing stuff together, wood and glue joinery really is some of the best and strongest joinery you can do. And with the glue on those splines dry, it's just a matter of trimming them flush, and I'm going to do that on my bandsaw. Alright, no, this is my favorite part. Sanding. I mean, who doesn't love running scratchy paper over wood? After applying the stain, give it some time to soak in, and then come back and wipe off the excess. Unless you have a week or so for it to dry, then you can leave the excess on, and you end up with a really interesting look. It looks pretty old and vintage, but in this case, I need it done in like an hour. While I give this stain some time to dry, I'm cutting out a backer board from a piece of foam core. And with some 800 grit sandpaper, giving the frame a very light final sanding. Followed with a finishing coat of shellac. Now to remove the coins from the original frame, and doing my best to keep them in their same layout and order. And with all the coins put in, I think it looks pretty nice. Now there's actually slots for 54 coins, because that arrangement works better on an 8x10, and I'd originally just had 2 coins on the top row, but my dad had actually taped up a couple bicentennial quarters, so I just figured to make coin holders across that entire top row. But instead of just leaving one blank, I decided just to put in one normal quarter, but one from 1985, because that's the year I was born. This tool is called a point driver. It's like a staple gun that fires those little picture frame tabs, and it's a pretty handy tool to have. Well, all that's left to do is add the hanging hardware. Now I could just use a sawtooth hanger like the old one had. However, since the old one had a habit of falling off the wall, I think I want to use something a bit more secure, so I'm going to opt for some keyhole fasteners. Now if you'd like to know more about keel fasteners, I have a 16-minute video dedicated entirely to that topic, with over 3,000 views. Why? Anyway, when installing keel fasteners, you will usually route out an area behind the keel fastener so it can sit flush, but normally it's just easier to just screw them right onto your surface. However, not all keel fasteners are designed to be flush mounted. These, for instance, need a cavity in order for the screw head to slide underneath it. And to make that cavity, I'm just going to drill 2 shallow holes with a Forstner bit. And I always like to make a mounting template when giving a frame as a gift. Just a piece of cardboard or foam core or even paper with the screw positions marked out on it. This way all they have to do is line it up on the wall where they want it, make a mark, screw in the screws, and hang it. Well, I am quite pleased with how that came out. I think this is probably the best frame that I have ever made. The miters are unbelievably good, and I'm so happy with the splines. It made this thing rock solid. If you've never tried doing splines before, I highly recommend it. The coin display, the alignment could be a little bit better, but I don't think it really detracts from it all that much. And for anyone wondering, this is a mixed collection. Coins are from both the P and the D mint. So it's not a hardcore collection or anything by any means. But they were collected along the way as they were released throughout that decade. Well, it is meant to be a gift, so one final thing, gotta wrap it up.
Oh, that looks really good. I was hoping it would be on wood. Oh, that's classy. That looks good.
Thanks, Nick.
That looks really good.
My sincere thank you for watching. Once again, I am Nick D. Clements, if you're wondering. Nick is short for Nicholas, and the D stands for Dad. Anyway, I'm off to make something else. Crikey, I've spotted some wild bunwaits. They do wait in herds.